Our government is known not only for its shameless corruption, it also has an embarrassing reputation for violating human rights. According to the Tokyo Commission on Human Rights chairperson, Laila M. de Lima, during her speech commemorating the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights last December 2008, our country's overall record is, open quotation, dismal, close quotation. She deplored the recent resurgence of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances with, open quotation, the armed forces as the primary suspect, close quotation. During the same occasion, Archbishop Angel Artemio, the president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, lamented that the observance of Human Rights Day, and I quote him, gives us a feeling of shame and embarrassment because of the innumerable human rights violations that have remained unexamined, unexplained, and unsolved or covered up by events, close quotation. On December 10, 2008, the human rights group Karapatan documented about 1,000 victims of extrajudicial killings, another 1,000 victims of torture, and almost 1,500 victims of illegal arrest during the 8 years of this administration. The harrowing tale narrated by Raymond Manalo of his and his brother Reynaldo's torture, as well as that of UP students Karen Empeño and Cheryl Cadapan at the hands of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, aired in ANC's Storyline 2 months ago, should convince even the most jaded among us of the urgent need to vindicate human rights violations in our country. In its country report on human rights practices dated February 25, 2009, the U.S. State Department confirmed that, open quotation, arbitrary, unlawful, and extrajudicial killings by elements of the security services and political killings, including killings of journalists by a variety of actors, continued to be major problems. In recent years, following increased domestic and international scrutiny, reforms were undertaken, and the number of killings and disappearances dropped dramatically. But concerns about impunity persisted, close quotation. 2 weeks ago, the European Parliament expressed, and I quote, grave concern at the hundreds of cases of extrajudicial killings of political activists and journalists that have occurred in recent years in the Philippines, and the role of the security forces have played in orchestrating and perpetuating these murders, close quotation. Speaking before the ASEAN National Human Rights Institution Forum last March 17, Ambassador Alastair MacDonald of the European Union said, and I quote, here in the Philippines, I cannot speak of human rights without condemning the recent killings of Rebellion Itao in Davao and Elazar Villanes in Coronadal, close quotation. In this world of this dismal and worsening track record of corruption and human rights violations in our country, what has been the response of our leaders and policymakers? I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, mostly rhetoric, evasiveness, and finger-pointing, like calling Transparency International biased and suggesting that it had been bought by the opposition, or ignoring the World Bank reports and hoping its jarring findings would slip into oblivion, or proposing some kind of authoritarian rule and shooting drug suspects like Ferdinand Marcos did, or condemning our presidential form of government and instituting the parliamentary system as the end-all remedy to the ills of governance, or dismissing President Obama's warning and saying that all governments in the world are corrupt anyway. Sus Mariosep. For too long, our people have waited for vindication, for honest-to-goodness prosecution of monster grafters and human rights violators. Many in civil society have lamented alleged inaction and imprudent actions of the Office of the Ombudsman. Some have taken the extreme measure of filing impeachment complaints against the incumbent ombudsman. As to whether impeachment will be a sufficient solution remains to be seen, considering that it is treated more as a political rather than as a legal process. As keenly observed by the recent Global Integrity Report I cited earlier, our Constitution established democratic institutions like the Office of the Ombudsman, the Commission on Audit, and other government offices to assure good governance and check abuses. However, in actual implementation, these institutions, as I've said in another speech quoted by Attorney Kapunan, have failed to discharge their functions as expected. It still takes morally courageous and competent incumbents to make institutions work. The problem, may I repeat, is that the cancer of incompetence, shoddiness and deference to the appointing authority, more than to the Constitution and to our people, has metastasized in many of our leaders. Because of this metastasis, our democratic institutions have been subverted and failed to stop malgovernance. A culture of impunity has overtaken our country to a point where our leaders seem not to care anymore about accountability and responsibility. When local laws and institutions no longer work, people think of marching in the streets in the hope that another EDSA miracle would happen, as it did in 1986 and 2001. Some even think of civil disobedience, and some even of rebelling. But for us, who believe in the rule of law rather than in the rule of force, a new avenue, a new access to international remedies has been opened. Last March 4, the International Criminal Court, or ICC, based at The Hague in the Netherlands, issued a warrant of arrest for a sitting head of state, President Omar Hassan Ahmad al-Bashir of Sudan. He had been charged with gross violation of human rights and, if I may quote the charge sheet, for murdering, exterminating, raping, torturing, and forcibly transforming large number of civilians and pillaging their property, close quotation. This novel international law development is very significant for two reasons. One, it marks the first time that a warrant of arrest had been issued against a sitting or incumbent head of state, contrary to the long-held theory of immunity for incumbent head of states. Two, Sudan, like the Philippines, had not ratified their own statute that established the ICC. Yet the ICC still issued the warrant. I believe this recent international law development should give leaders, those who cling to power through corruption and deceit and the silencing of dissent, some pause and know that there is no more sanctuary, no more immunity from heinous crimes, not on this planet anyway. Back to the Philippines. On a more positive note, our people will have the grand opportunity during the general elections scheduled in May next year to change our leaders who would not unclench their fists. Again, judging from the surveys and opinion polls, our people may be patient in awaiting the expiration of the terms of our leaders. But as Pulse Asia's February 24/9 Survey shows